Hello and welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today's Fireside Chat. I'm Arvind Kugasia, Engineering Chief here at Aslan. Today, we are going to be discussing probably the hottest topic in business and technology world, the generative AI. Often amongst the industry leaders, the topic everyone is discussing is Gen AI and speed at which it has entered. However, still on ground, many of our clients do ask, what is the real value of it? And I often feel in lines of, what Eric says is, what is the value of inventing a new kind of intelligence, which let's say could improve every single industry process, be it HR tech, fintech, edutech, or a healthcare. Quite big, yeah, but how big? A report recently produced says it's approximately $40 trillion business. I guess it's big enough for everyone to play. That's the kind of value and impact Gen AI could bring on, be it the frontier model or open source model, or it's going to be a multi, agent emergence. Who's going to make the most impact? Only time would tell. Today specifically, we are covering the impact of generative AI, that it could have on the future of HR tech. I'm joined by a friend, colleague, and an HR tech guru, someone I greatly enjoy my conversations with, a thought leader, visionary, someone who is greatly contributing to several big research firms and amongst the list of the top few influencers in the HR tech. Welcome, Steve.
Arvind, thank you so much. Great to see you again. Wow, I hope I live up to that wonderful introduction.
No, absolutely, Steve. I think I sometimes wonder that 3 decades of contribution. So what is it really? It keeps you going.
Yeah, so thanks for making me a little bit younger. This is actually my 40th year. I don't mind dating myself. It's always good to be able to date yourself, I guess. What keeps me going? So the psychoanalyst and psychologist Carl Jung, I think I'm pronouncing his name right, years ago, once said, life really begins when we get older. He didn't specify what age, when we get older. And he followed that line by saying, and that's because for a good part of our life, we're doing research. So that really resonated with me. I feel like I've been doing research for many years, and now I'm at a point where I want people, including myself and those around me, but also any audience that reads my stuff or listens to my talks, it can benefit them. So that's what keeps me going. Really bringing my research phase to real life and benefiting others.
I would just simply say, keep it flowing. The world needs it. No question
about it. Thank you.
And specifically, with regard to today's topic in particular, with generative AI coming in, do you really think that the revival probably is the right word, for HR tech with Gen AI coming in?
I'm not sure if revival is the right word, because that implies there's been a bit of a period of stagnation. So I would say there's sufficient cause for a lot of excitement. And if we think about the last 30, 40 years in HR tech, which I've been a witness to, probably half of that chunk of years, the first 20 or so of the last 40, the world of HR tech really focused on transactional benefits to organizations, employee life cycle, hire to retire. Part of it was the way it was conceptualized, but a big part of it was the way solutions were designed. It was to aid HR departments principally in making transactions more efficient and bringing about better outcomes from those transactions or HR processes. We went through that period, was followed by a period really in the last 5-10 years of enabling processes to be optimized, enabling experiences to be of a higher quality. And it's really only, I think Gen AI, and it was introduced roughly a year ago, last November. I think Gen AI is now pushing us and pulling us into the next phase. And I consider it the problem-solving phase, not just problems for HR or people managers, problems for enterprises, complex enterprises You want to solve problems, then you have to tie the different parts of the business together. You need to have an expansive view, an integrated view, and a view that leverages whatever data and content you can get your hands on and be able to mash through it quickly. And really, I just described Gen AI. So it's not a resurgence or a renaissance. I think it's a brand new door that's going to lead to quite a bit for people.
Yeah, I like that terminology, the brand new door in particular. I was also going through some of your recent blogs in particular, and the use cases that you referred, in particular. Do you see any sort of challenges, in terms of world adopting it, and or you still think that it's sort of a gimmick, a sales gimmick in general, or you really think that the adoption is going to be faster?
Yeah, I think it's going to be, I don't know about faster. It depends on how you're kind of framing the cycle time, so to speak. But I think experimentation is going to be universal, and it's already started. It's already universal experimentation. If your organization is not experimenting with Gen AI, then you're already a laggard as far as I'm concerned. So so adoption is a given. It's a matter of the processes surrounding adoption. It's almost like the prompting approach to Gen AI. When you prompt Gen AI, it has a couple of kind of standard components, right? It's the goal or the objective or set of objectives. It's the context. And how do you want to get it back so you can consume it and take action on it? And you can almost look at adoption of AI or Gen AI the same way. You need to have clearly defined goals, but the context should not be narrow. Gen AI is allowing your aperture or the hole that you peek through to be very broad. So make the context as broad as you want. And I think people will be amazed that Gen AI can keep up with the way you're conceptualizing using it. So it's not a gimmick. It's an amazing resource, and we will all get to experience it in different ways.
No, certainly. One aspect, which when I look at the adoption aspect in particular, which it did provide a lot of insights. If you really look at the small to medium-sized firms, prior to the COVID, them going for a lot of HCM products applications was much lesser, compared to the kind of need for communication, collaboration, all of it. It started emerging post-COVID. Similarly, I think, do you see, will the Gen AI be reserved for some of the enterprises, or you think that small and the mid-sized companies will also start to leverage it?
Yeah, so the reason why I use the word universal when I talk about a Gen AI in terms of where we're going to see it, where the benefits will be manifested, but also who are the principals using it. I think it's universal across all sizes of organizations. We're going to see those benefits. And if we just zero in on smaller organizations, where are they really challenged? They don't have the resources. And let's think about the people resources that are needed by smaller organizations to be able to solve business problems. They often don't have that contingent of people that are critical thinkers, that can think about how do we leverage data, what should the analysis framework look like. Smaller organizations typically don't have that luxury and those resources. But Gen AI is leveling the playing field because you don't need a lot of people to go through that process I just articulated. Gen AI will speed up and compress the time needed to gather data, do analysis, reach conclusions, validate your conclusions, and the amount of data will be much more, and amount of content will be much more than we've ever tried to leverage in the past. So it's the great equalizer, the great neutralizer. I know that sounds a little bit like hyperbole, but I really do believe in it.
Yeah, no. The another, linked aspect, to the adoption, which I really foresee, and I just wanted to, know your perspective is, the specialized models in particular. We have seen, the areas like, performance analysis, and we talk about onboarding, if you talk about something even like, talent, do you think more specific models will start to emerge, more specialized models, I would rather say, just so that the world could benefit?
I do, but it also triggers a question that I have for you. If we could reverse roles here for a minute. The word skills comes to mind, and everybody is talking about skills in all kinds of different ways these days, skills science, skills graphs. But if we really think about where the rubber meets the road, skills involves people. So if you're going to, and your role, Arvind, the fact that you lead a fairly large development organization, here you have this amazing resource at your disposal now, and in the early stages of its evolution and commercialization. When you start to think about all the skills that are associated with Gen AI. It's not a binary thing, as you've told me in the past. It's not, oh, you have Gen AI skill set or not. It breaks out into many, many different skills. So how do you approach this when clients are coming to you with engagements and you have to think about what Gen AI related skills are most relevant here?
So I think the one aspect I would say is, we've come a long way in terms of adopting technologies. When things like Gen AI came in, the use cases are not very clearly, that could just you start to leverage, because on the start you would always find that, hey, this is something more which is NLP driven. You're going to be only benefiting certain aspects of it. But as you start to look at the deeper world, the offering, you start to see the greater benefits. So I would share something of what we have actually done internally. So having been working with around, let's say, 500 engineers, one of the biggest problems on ground that we face is it's not just about people writing binary that, hey, I've got Java experience of, let's say, 5 years or 8 years. Now in certain circumstances, what I've observed is the experience of even somebody who's just 1 year old, but having the knowledge of, let's say, certain workflows, having worked on, let's say, key clocks or authorizations, or even worked on some of the security aspect. Now that person is more relevant than even a 10-year-old, a Java engineer. So for me, what we have done is we have tried, building up a model in a way where on a recurring basis, we ask the engineers to go ahead and record their experiences, whenever they work on a module. Now, this kind of voice-enabled, options for them to feedback to the system collectively grows large. And then somebody working for 5 years would have probably worked around, let's 70 to 80 big problems, 200 to 300 different kinds of areas within the technology. Now, this, in true sense, is the real experience. This is something nobody would like to see in a CV, because you never want to see the large CVs. People are like, hey, give me just one page of CV and things like that. But in the real world, if you're trying to solve the real problem of the right skill for the right job, this is what probably you require on ground. And we have been able to leverage it beautifully. At any given point of time, when there is a skill need, I would just go ahead and say, hey, give me somebody who's worked on, let's say, an ELSA workflow, somebody who's worked on this. A basic search, yields me this data. At the same time, what engineers or employees benefit out of it is they've got a more powerful CV, which actually the world would like to see. So that's how we have actually leveraged Gen AI on ground.
Wow. I have not read or heard about this way of leveraging Gen AI, and I appreciate you sharing that with me. I mean, it really strikes you in such a meaningful way. And so, when people think about content, obviously the projects somebody worked on, the skills they used on those projects, even what project they would like to work on next. So you could have a very comprehensive view of a person and what the needs are using Gen AI, and you could do it very quickly. And it helps the organization, and it helps the people. And by the way, in my years in HCM and HR tech, one of the things that I've been trying to stress over the years is we need to find a balance between the needs, interests, and goals of the person or the employee, and the needs, interests, and goals of the enterprise. And based on this story, it seems like you're helping both the enterprise and the employee. So I applaud you for that.
No, absolutely. And I think, and the conversation we were in, and that's why more from you, I just would like to understand, because this is something that was a homegrown use case. We were like, hey, let's solve it this way. But when you really look at, for example, the onboarding as a problem, which is, I would still say only 50% of the onboarding process problems have actually been solved by the world. So do you think more specialized model is probably the way for future?
Well, sorry for the distraction. I live in Florida, and it's now thundering here. So hopefully we're going to stay online. But yeah, so I think specialized models, I think the degree of relevance, the degree of personalization, it's now going to expand exponentially. So it's kind of in a way a paradox, because Gen AI allows you to take an unlimited amount of context or information or content and make it super relevant. I mean, if you think about that, it's almost paradoxical. So that's why I think the models will get more specific. The way you service employees and other stakeholders will get more personalized, because you could take in more data points for the context and do it more quickly and serve up something that's very personalized and prescriptive.
No, very, very, very helpful. And that also brings me to a particular area, where the one industry, I see post-COVID, emerging quite well, which was not that relevant, was the one around mentoring in particular, and still being more aligned to that skill problem. I feel the more the content was generated, the consumers, increased during the COVID time. I just really wanted to check, purely this mentor-mentee relationship enabled, platforms and things like that. Do you see with Gen AI, which is actually mastered at playing with the data, the more platforms of this kind, are likely to emerge in future?
Well, platforms of this type, I think it's hard for me to be a fortune teller in that sense, but I will say I don't think many people were able to predict Gen AI 2 years ago. So I think at the very least, it opens up our minds to types of capabilities that we've never considered. So it's a little bit Star Wars-ish, I guess. But I think this is an exciting time where progress in technology it's certainly not incremental, and it's increasing even beyond exponential. Because even with exponential, you can foresee where is it going next or eventually. I think with Gen AI and other types of models, we can't really foresee everything that it's going to allow us to do. So it's a very exciting time.
More in line with that, Steve. Something more relevant, I would say, is more linked. I would say is learning platforms. We've seen the learning platforms purely depend upon the content. The beauty lies always around the how eventually the content is presented. Of course, the UX is important, but with Gen AI coming in, do you think that the learning platforms in particular will get a huge kick, which probably it was missing earlier?
Thank you for that. I feel very strongly, yes, affirmative. And so here's why. I mean, if we think about the learning technology space, kind of, 10, 15 years ago, LMSs, learning management systems, were all the rage. But they were largely there for the benefit, I would say, of the organization, what it was trying to achieve, and the learning was much more kind of, let's say, generalized to whatever the business area was and whatever the key skills needed to be learned or competencies. But the needs of that person, how they learn, what content were they retaining better than other content? What content did the person feel was most relevant? And also the medium and the pace of learning. And is it a 10-minute learning experience or a 1-hour learning experience? This is really what I'm trying to illustrate is the fact that the word personalization, which really permeates the whole learning arena, is a relative concept. So where learning experience platforms were, a lot of excitement was generated because the Netflix model, whatever you liked or whatever content was relevant, we're going to keep serving that up. But personalization is far beyond that. It's how we learn. It's the pace of learning. It's learning that excites us, and typically learning that excites us is not just for the organization's benefit, but for ours too. So personalization, I think, is going to be taken many leaps forward, and so I think any area of HR that involves personalization, learning is probably one of the major ones that comes to mind. But certainly, candidate relationship management within the recruiting space, personalization is super critical there. And we're not only going to be serving up job opportunities that seem relevant for a particular candidate, but now we can really personalize the employer value proposition and the pitch for a certain job. And when we do that pitch, and what are the key words that somebody's going to react to, and why would that pitch really resonate with somebody? So again, learning, recruiting, onboarding are 3 areas where I think Gen AI is going to serve up some major benefits to organizations.
I think it reminds me of something very interesting. With AI, which was already knocking the door, and it was all about the context. When I look at it from a development perspective, meaning, so here is something, within the NLP, somebody would say, let's say sentiment analysis. Somebody would just say, in this, the comments of the performance analyst, analyzed by a manager, the sentiment is anger, hatred, and things like that, right? So the context was supposed to be picked from whatever text that was available. Now, interestingly, with what Gen AI has done is that it remembers everything. It remembers the previous context, the previous to previous context, and that means, from learning perspective, it is almost like a movie which says, "Hey, train me into, train me German, train me French, train me Sanskrit," and things like that. And a much quicker way with Gen AI would just say, "Okay, hey, I'm going to train you very, very quickly about this whole article. Here you go. Only the relevant stuff that you need to know from this," which I felt was already there in AI, but I just feel with Gen AI coming in, it's becoming more and more sharper. It just reminds me my conversation with my daughter, where she asked me, "Hey, Dad, can you go through this 30-minute video and tell me the crux of it?" And I'm like, "Hey, I'm not going to be able to tell you the, a 2 or 3 minute crux of the whole video, because I'll have to concentrate." So that's what I really feel Gen AI is.
Wow, I want to unpack a couple of things you just said, because they really strike a chord in me. So first of all, in terms of sentiment analysis, for the folks listening in that aren't that familiar with the HR technology capability known as sentiment analysis, it's really the machine using anonymized content, like content in emails, and looking at what words are coming up, what themes are coming up. So you're getting a feel for what are people feeling in the organization without breaching confidentiality of who's thinking or saying what. So that's a one-time shot sentiment analysis. We could take a sentiment analysis tool and look today, how do people feel about the reorganization today? Well, guess what? we're going to have to do the same thing a month from now, and we'll see how they feel a month from now. But Gen AI will tell us directionally how's the sentiment going, because it has a historical perspective, as you indicated. So, I think that's it's a really important point. So, in the interest of time, I think we can keep going. But actually, I had another point about what you were saying with the doctor example, or watching a video or what have you. Again, if you think about the art or the science of prompting Gen AI, you start with a goal, you define and spell out the context, and then how do you want to benefit from whatever Gen AI is going to feed back to you, what sort of prescriptive format. So in your example, you could say to Gen AI, here's what I want. I want to learn the 3 most important things. I only have 20 minutes to learn it, and I'm in a noisy environment. So you can give it that level of context, and we never had a capability like this before, frankly.
No, absolutely. And then, like you said, in the interest of time, our conversations probably are endless. It will just continue forever. But just a couple of last thoughts. With so many biggies, already competing, to give the best to the world, with such fierce competition already out, do you think there's going to be collaboration to sort of go ahead, help the world in a way that we are all able to benefit from it? Do you foresee that a collaboration is coming?
Yes, I think it's inevitable, and it's inevitable in a very positive sense. And the analogy that comes to mind quickly is the airline industry, when you had the major carriers and the startup carriers years ago, basically building their own infrastructure around flight data, their own systems tracking flights, the path of flights, the delays around flights. And then, somewhere along the ways, the different airline companies got together and said, look, this is costing us a lot. Why don't we try to come up with a system for the industry? And we will try to have the right safeguards so we don't steal each other's trade secrets, but the industry and all of the people we serve can really, really benefit. And so that's what comes to mind. I think we will see the same thing here. Even the internet, you could argue, a lot of the kind of safeguards. Some people would say we need more safeguards around IP protection and all of that. But the internet was the same way. It was kind of like wild, wild west. And then we started to regulate so that everybody could benefit. And there was a lot of cooperation.
No, very insightful, Steve, there. Just a last, probably a thought for, all of the leaders out there, more in terms of, worrying about the adoption. What would probably say just one thing that they should remember, going for generative AI, for their businesses?
Well, thanks. It's one of my favorite topics is change management, and almost everything in business has an element of change management. And if you think about change management, one of the kind of planks in the whole task of assessing readiness for change is looking at emotional reaction to the change. You're going to have excitement. You're going to have fear. It's going to run the gamut. You're going to have people that are really anxious, that are insecure, thinking about job security and that sort of thing. All of that gets rolled up into assessing readiness for change. And an organization, if you really want to get max benefit from, the amazing use cases that some of which we're talking about here, then you have to be very thoughtful about not just assessing readiness for change, but the different reactions to this type of innovation, and not humor employees if they're demeaning this, or they're creating some negativity around it, or they have insecurity about their job. All of that needs to be acknowledged. Why? Because it's all valid. So readiness for change is best dealt with in an authentic way, and a very thoughtful way. And I think organizations will benefit in the long run.
No, well said, Steve. So with this thought and also the revolution which is underway, let's hope it's leading all of us to a bright and a prosperous future. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for all the insights, and most importantly, it's always a pleasure having conversations. Like I said, the conversations will go on forever, but yeah, there's a clock that we all, we both will need to respect to. But thank you again, and pleasure, and hopefully we'll connect again.
My pleasure, Arvind. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, bye.